Welcome, everyone, to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and on this podcast, I take a deep dive into the writing process behind some of the world's best songwriters. By way of background, I am a former English professor. I have a PhD in English language and literature, and I'm a writer myself. So this is a conversation about writing between two writers. My goal has always been to treat songwriters the same way that we treat prose writers, just as writers, plain and simple. So that's all we focus on. I don't care about tour stories, favorite bands, how bands get their name, favorite foods, anything like that. This is, again, a deep dive into the songwriting process with some of the world's best songwriters. And with that, let's get into today's episode. And today on the pod, it is Max and Julian of Whitney. Whitney's latest album is called Small Talk. It is fantastic. And we dug a lot into the ritual on this episode. And I've got a great quote that Julian said, and it's a gem. He said, "Pants delivery was my eureka moment." What the hell does that even mean? Well, actually, it's pretty simple, and it's very literal, that when they were writing the first album, he also had a job delivering pants. He was a clothing delivery person, and he drove a van delivering clothes. I'm guessing dry cleaning. And the van didn't have working radio. So he spent all this time on these long, monotonous drives. And that's where he got a lot of ideas on those monotonous drives. That was Julian. Max grew up a swimmer, and he found swimming. Listen, you're staring at the bottom of the pool and just doing lap after lap after lap. That can be a great place to get ideas. But now he's a runner, and he says that on his runs, he listens to one song, and it's the same song over and over again. But he finds that to be inspiring. So as you can tell, we talked a lot about how important monotony is, monotonous activities to the ritual. One thing that, if you know the band's backstory, their history, these two guys lived together in an apartment in Boston. And so they live in the place where their studio is. And we talked a fair amount about how that process, I mean, when you literally live in the place where you're writing music, that can make for a lot of different experiences in the creative process. And boy, they do a lot of, I've got all these things written down, so many things I wrote down. They do a lot of their songwriting, their music, their songwriting on a 4-track cassette machine, not on voice memos. So a lot of those initial ideas, those demos, are on a cassette machine. And the one thing, I think it was Max told me this also, that when you're in a rut, to let your identity off the hook, and that is create something in someone else's voice. And I know that when I was a professor, I would tell my students that a lot too, that when you have writer's block, a good thing to do is to write and try to imitate another writer, whether it's Hemingway or Dickens or Jane Austen, whoever you want to write about. But that can be a great way to kind of break through that rut. And so that's what they will do if they find that they're maybe in a little bit of a dead end, to create in someone else's voice, and that can be effective. So a lot of good nuggets here for the process. So again, new album is called Small Talk. Here's my interview with Whitney. So Max, let's start with you. Are you an everyday writer and of like writing anything, or are you only a write when the mood strikes type of person?
It really depends, because I feel like the way that I write is always firstly musically and before any sort of lyrics come involved. And sometimes it's like sit down at the desk. Like I literally are in a session right now and taking a break from it to talk. So some days it's like, let's just start a new idea with nothing, no like concept of where we're starting, and you lose an entire day. And sometimes you sit down and play the guitar once and you're like, I can't do this at all. So I think it's a daily attempt to sit down in front of a recording device and try, and whether or not it feels inspiring is pretty easy to tell immediately.
So yeah, how much patience do you have? You said it's an attempt. So I guess the struggle for me as a writer, I'm not a songwriter, a prose writer, but how long do you go before you say, it's just not happening today, I need to set this aside?
I think I enjoy the recording process so much that even if it's like a shitty idea, I like the act of like recording and like messing around with all the stuff and options in the studio. So I think in a pinch where like the music itself isn't inspiring me very much, I'm just having fun in the studio itself. So like usually we'll still spend like a few hours on it. And then the next day just be like, that was weird. And move on.
Those ideas, if you don't think that attempt is working, do you deliberately set those ideas aside and then come back to them later on?
Yeah, yeah. Definitely have done stuff like that, but I don't think that's something that I think mentally it's maybe a little healthier just to set them aside and then like way down the road you're like, what was I doing? Because I think the way we export is also interesting. You see, everything is like dated for like the title of each idea is dated, so it's like, oh, what were we doing in November of last year? And then you're like, damn, I actually kind of like this thing, you know. So definitely there is some rediscovery, but um, it's usually again like unintentional or comes from like just like curiosity of what we were doing, less of like thinking we're like saving stuff for later. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Julian, how about you? Everyday person or when the mood strikes?
Um, honestly, like super similar to Max, except I'm not really sitting down in the studio to like multi-track. I'm like sitting down to figure out um, if there's like a chord change or a chord progression that I can like pair with a melody that makes me feel like, oh hell yeah, we like have to work on this. Um, so I can kind of do that like um, you know, we all kind of struggle to ride on tour, uh, just because I don't know, we're busy and we're usually feeling crazy. Um, but I feel like it'll happen more often for me if there's an acoustic guitar laying around and it's sound check or whatever, and I can like find a quiet corner, um, and mess around. But it's the same thing. It's like, you know, I also have like hundreds of voice memos on my phone of either like they didn't um jog me enough to even like send to Max, or um yeah, or I just like forgot. um but yeah, I mean usually like I'm just trying to find like a more like basic spark, for lack of a better word. um and then like, you know, if we haven't been together for like a couple weeks, if we're sitting around the house, then I'll end up playing one or two of those, and then like if it just kind of naturally like perks Max's ears up, then we'll start working on it, you know.
Are there things that you do to kind of get that spark flying? Are there certain tricks that you have? I mean, I think we all have certain things. Like I do certain things if I find that things aren't happening quickly, things I do to kind of make things go along faster. Are there any things that you do to initiate or get that spark flying to extend the metaphor?
Really, like I think maybe like a strength of mine is like my knowledge of like theory, especially when applied to the guitar, is like quite low. um So honestly, I think that I'll just like stumble upon like a couple chord shapes that I've never put together that just like happen to like flow in a way that feels like something. And then yeah, I mean honestly, it's just I feel like constantly feeling like I'm learning an instrument like the guitar um is really like the method for me. And at some point I'm sure I'll study it, and then I'll, you know, so I can think about layering and stuff a little bit uh better or something, but yeah.
I have had songwriters tell me that one way that they can get that spark going is to go to an instrument that they're not that good at, or they just started playing. Like they find that if they're, and it can be, yeah, I think I had on Nils Lofgren from the E Street Band, like I think 10 years ago, and he said his wife bought him a harp. And he started playing the harp, and he found that the harp actually gave him new ideas that he never would have gotten on guitar. Um, so I thought that
I
was always,
believe.
yeah. Um, so Matt, I'm ask both of you about the voice memos. Is there, because we all have hundreds of voice memos on our phones. I have hundreds of notes, but there's no organization to them whatsoever. Is there, Max, we'll start with you. Is there any organization besides the date to those apps, to the notes app or the voice memos?
Yeah, I'm honestly less of a voice memo person. I'm someone who like if the voice memo for me is still like a 4-track, which is like a nerdy thing to say, but we have a 4-track cassette machine, and that's if I'm like trying to record something really quick that I don't care that I want to sound charming, I'd rather put it on cassette tape and then bounce it out. And I'm kind of like and like the method of the limitations of like a 4-track recorder are still like really important to process, I think, for me personally, in arrangements. So I guess like my voice memos are like a desert. You know, everything's in the email for me, like little MP3s in the email.
Yeah, so how often do you go back to those? I mean, I have all those, and I always have this idea that I'm going to sit down and mine those ideas, but I never do. But do you go back? Do you go back pretty consistently and look for ideas, even if they're
Yeah,
months,
and then
years ago?
sometimes it's like like the concept of a joke idea is really important to me, or something like that. Something that's so lighthearted. Like I think Julian was in Denmark. His wife lives in Denmark, so him and her are traveling back and forth while they figure out the visa. Um, but like I had the space to myself, and it was like Halloween time. I was like, I'm gonna make like a spooky David Lynch song today. Like, and it was so pastiche, but it was so fun to make. And then like I honestly like listening to those, and I made it on the 4-track, so it sounds like kind of like trash in like a way that I love. I'll listen to that just like and be like, wow, I like was able to like perform this kind of like concept exactly how I want to. It's like that kind of practice of like letting your identity off the hook first, and of being like, this music has to represent me fully, and being like, I'm going to perform someone else's identity for a moment and like let it be funny and kind of like right. Those are the ideas that I have the most fun listening to back, that are like don't become songs, if that makes sense.
It does, and that's interesting because that's an old trick that prose writers do. If you find that they find that they're in a rut, it's deliberately write in another author's voice.
Mm.
Like like I remember teaching that, like write like Hemingway, write a short story like Hemingway. So deliberately write something, and I think that's a great trick for a prose writer to kind of break through ideas, is to say write a short story in someone else's voice.
Mhm. And it's really fun. Like you can, yeah. When I listen back to that, it's like really charming, and I'm like, oh, but and yeah.
All right, Julian, how about you? So is there any organization besides the date to those voice memos?
Yeah, I have like a star system, but it's like asterisks as stars. Um, but I honestly, it's either a three. If it's getting any stars, it's either 3 stars or 5 stars. If that makes sense. It's like
It's a binary.
it's like a damn. We should definitely fuck around with this in the future, or we should maybe fuck around with this in the future.
So if I'm getting this straight, there's no 4-star, or is it 1 or 2, just 3 and 5?
Yes, pretty much.
Yes, it's two options.
Yeah.
It's a maybe or a yes.
Hey, I don't. That's just the pattern, the shape it's taken for whatever reason.
I love it. How often are you going back and mixing and matching and those ideas and putting them into a collective song? I find that that's pretty common. I certainly do it again as a prose writer. But Julian, I'll continue with you. Are you going back and maybe taking a part from here and a part from here and collectively putting it into one?
I don't think that ever really works for us. I think the first time that we ever successfully did that was on this album, but it was 2 parts that were in the same session, if that makes sense. Like we thought we were writing a chorus to a verse, but then it wound up just being like a sort of separated outro. And it's on the song called Darling. But previously, I mean, we've tried to do that quite a few times, and there's something that just doesn't feel natural about it.
Hmm.
You know?
All right, Max, we'll go to you now. I want to talk about the ritual. I certainly have a ritual as a writer, favorite chairs, time of day. How important is that to you? I mean, it's funny because I mean, prose writers are very specific about this. Um, but I'd love to get your take. How important is, like I said, is there a certain time of day, place how important is the ritual to you?
Well, I think it's interesting because you've caught us at a point, I think, in a little bit more of transition with that, where like our we've lived together for 10 plus years. The studio has always been, it's literally like, in what is considered a Chicago dining room, living room, dining room, kitchen, and our dining room has always been the studio. And so our process, and I think our preference, was always like around 1 or 2 get started. And then if an idea really speaks to us, we'll be working until 1 or 2 in the morning. And we've had, a lot of luck with very friendly neighbors that allow us we have a drum set in here, like it's like we have, so I don't know how that worked out for us, but it did. And I think part of like the late night session and kind of like at a certain point, having a beer or two and kind of like letting the song kind of wash over us in a way that feels like new, like take a break, have dinner together, have a beer, then come back and kind of reapproach it in the same day has been important. And I think things are changing a little now. Again, with just life changes. I'm spending a little more time at my partner's house, which is 5 minutes from here. And so like I'll come here for the day and we'll open up the studio until like dinner time. And then, kind of like go have dinner with our partners, especially when Katrine's in town. His wife, she's staying here. So I think we're kind of like finding the new balance of when works for us in our mid-30s.
There's still always going to be the late night sort of ritual. I feel like is always going to have to be on the table at some point. Like eventually, I'm sure we're going to rent a studio space at some, in some part of the city,
Mm-hmm.
and I bet we'll end up leaving our cars there at least once or twice.
I think that the preference is like, honestly, like the catalyst to it is like being so in the studio that like you forget what time it is, and like just like completely losing it. Like when you're like, oh shit, it's time to eat dinner, then maybe like we're looking for a reason to stop. Compared to like when you're really in it, sometimes you're just like forget to eat, and like you're just like, holy shit, this is the most important thing to do today, I think.
So you typically don't start until the early afternoon. Neither of you are really morning people.
Oh, we're up early, but I think we just like to have, usually both of us, to like try to exercise and have like coffee and like get our brains awake and stuff like that. But yeah, and we're not like sleepers or anything.
So can you write? I can't. Even when I was in college, I could never pull all-nighters. Never. And then I read recently that that's actually a genetic thing. People are night owls or early morning. That's something we just can't, like, as much as we try, apparently that's a genetic thing. So but I do hear a lot of writers love to write 3 or 4 in the morning because something about the silence when the world is asleep. It's not just the lack of distractions, it's something about being awake when no one else is. So do you pull those all night sessions ever?
We're never. I don't think we're ever trying to go all night proper. But I mean, we'll go till 4. And we used to be able to do that like consecutively. But now I think we like, at least when we're at home and we have the luxury to like take the next day to chill. We're going to like lick our wounds if we're up till 4, because that also means we're drinking wine or smoking cigarettes, all that stuff. Unless we're in the studio, like there is something I think maybe hopefully for the rest of our lives, if we get out of town to some actual peace and quiet, and like the only focus is to like record the songs that we've written or mostly written. I think then the hours are just completely shot. Like we're going to stay up till 5 or 6, maybe every night. It's like we're locking into a different world,
Now the big question, and Max, I'll start with you. When it comes to lyrics, pen and paper or pencil, or are you a computer/phone person?
It just off the dome for me. Julian will kind of start something, and then I'm most of the times reacting to it. And not editing is like such a gnarly word that makes it feel like there's like some hierarchy, but like, just kind of like assisting and like morphing the kind of like general prose of it. Or being like, those 2 words sound really good, those 2 words like sound weird when you sing them and stuff like that. So I think personally, I get the benefit of kind of like just like pacing around and letting things bounce off me. And I less have to focus on like form.
All right, Julian, how about you then? Pen and paper or computer?
If we're getting to the point, because like you said, like a lot of it is really just like us two in a room just throwing ideas out. Um, and then pretty much tracking them like line by line in the moment. Um, a lot of times there isn't any need to like take them down, period. But I mean, if we're really stumped and we're getting to a point where it's like, oh damn, we're like really much more complicated and not appearing, the pieces aren't appearing as naturally as other songs. Uh, I'm gonna write it down physically. We're not I don't really like that. Like I'll do it if there's no paper around, but um, I do think there's some like the actual physical act of writing out words and looking at them, and I just think that that's maybe um a millennial for saying that to some people, but like I do think there's just something like special about that, and I'm sure it helps you process in a different way.
Well, I mention this all the time, but there's plenty of research out there that shows they've done this with college students, found that students who take notes with pen and paper have much greater recall than taking notes on a computer.
Yeah.
Well, what's funny about that I never realized is like sometimes our notepad is literally just Pro Tools.
Are you beholden to a certain? I know this is going to sound very specific, but you'd be surprised how loyal people are. But are you beholden to a certain type of pen or certain type of paper or even certain color of ink?
Um, No, absolutely not with the ink. But I mean, we always just end up winding those like or buying those speckled college ruled like notepads from Target. I'm not like a. I also like. I don't have great handwriting, so my writing is like pretty big. So I'm not going to do like a small moleskin. I feel that actually makes me feel kind of claustrophobic.
I like it. Um, so I want to get this straight because I haven't asked this question for years, and I feel like it's such an easy question to ask. But I want to just get a handle on the process. So when you two sit down, you're never sitting down with lyrics first, if I'm hearing you correctly. It's always with music first, and then is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
always with me. I mean, I think we're both believers that melody and harmony and arrangement are like really what makes a song stick with you. Um, and not to like lyric. I think also lyrics just don't necessarily come naturally to our brains. I do think that when we put our brains together and sometimes with a third party, we can come up with like some pretty great, you know, like powerful lyrics. But um, yeah, I think like a big North Star for this band is just like writing melodies that we're proud of.
So at what point then do the lyrics come in? Is that completely random? I mean, is there any point when you start to write, or is that completely just depends on when that eureka moment happens?
Well, sometimes they come with the lyrics, like um, almost not usually fully formed, but like a chorus will come fully formed or like the hook. Um, so sometimes like a giant center piece of the puzzle is there, and then all we have to do is sort of like reorient things around it, and find a way to make that chorus impactful. But yeah, it can be totally random. And I mean, it's like lyrics for dandelions was like literally dragged on for months until the end of the mixing process, and it was really like almost to the point where like we were going to throw the song away.
Yeah, because I feel like I have ideas that I just discard because I feel like they're just not going to happen. But what made you insist on seeing that song through rather than just saying we need to spend our time on something else? So there's a very fine line there. I feel like.
Honestly, I think at that for this specific one, like I said, there's no like one size fits all for deciding a song. Um, needs like we should keep um trying to figure out the puzzle of lyrics instead of just moving on to a new idea. Um, namely, I think we were with this one specifically. We were later on in the album writing process and had like an idea of the album as a whole, and like what Julian was saying, musically and melodically, it seemed like a nice foil to some of the other songs on the record of just being like optimistic and shiny. And we were like, those songs are harder to come by for us sometimes because I think we usually write in a more somber or melancholy kind of tone. Then Dandelions is just like kind of candy or something at times. Um, and when those ideas come up kind of naturally, instead of trying for them, I think we're a little more precious.
So, do you need to be in a somber, melancholic, emotional state to write that kind of song? I mean, how important is it that the emotional state that you're in tracks that song you're trying to write?
I don't think it's more of like it's like a emotional memory. I feel like Islands really jumps out, like on the new album, Islands really jumps out to me, and where it's like, like the first lines are about, about touring and like when you're in a weird hotel room and you've played the show and you're having a drink by yourself and you're kind of like, what the fuck is this life that I'm decided on committing to? And I think that's something that every musician or person that's artist that's traveled for their job has had some sort of relationship to, and we certainly have felt that way. And so when that line came up, it's less of like we're feeling that way in that moment, but we're like, damn, yeah, that's like something that we've all kind of experienced and speaks to that.
Do you need distance? Julian asked you this. Do you need distance to be able to write about something? I mean, I always quote Hemingway, and Hemingway said he could never write about Paris when he was in Paris. He needed to be away from it to be able to write about it. So, emotionally, do you need distance to be able to write about something, or is immediacy a better place to write from?
I think I would definitely agree with Hemingway. I just don't think that you can, or at least I, or probably Max, can view, like the actual impact of whatever's happening, whatever that impact is going to be on your life until after it happens, let alone like process that. And, like, I'm just trying to think. I mean, like I think the reason why we wrote Darling while Max was like really in the eye of the storm of a breakup, but I had also previously gone through a breakup like 3 or 4 months earlier. So, um, yeah, I mean, I guess sometimes you can probably catch lightning in a bottle. Like, I don't know, Neil Young writing Ohio, that's a different, yeah, I think a political situation that's like kind of maybe a little more, the intensity of the moment can maybe help you process it or whatever. But yeah, as far as like personal life traumas and stuff and life struggles and hurdles, I think that we need not be well past it, but we need to be at least like halfway past it.
Those lightning in a bottle ideas, when they happen, do you are you more likely to say, let's not touch this? There's a reason why it happened so quickly.
I feel like that was I don't know, maybe the main example of that was like when we were trying to write the second album. Um, and I don't think we had like completed a song yet, but then, and we had been trying and we were like burnt out from tour and blah, blah, blah. And just having like, pretty typical, sophomore album writer's block and like confidence checks and everything. Um, and we wrote Giving Up in like maybe 20 minutes. And I think both Max and I were just like, I don't know, it's too simple, like whatever. But then we ended up sending it to the label along with a couple other ideas, and they were like, Giving Up, that's the one. That type of thing. Like, I mean, Max and I probably would have put it on the album at the end of it all, but uh, yeah, I think we need some help with those ideas probably. The ones that seem too simple are freaky. Put it that way.
We're also like, I think one of the things in our process that we've had to put work into is not being such tweakers, because we'll just like fiddle with an idea for like knowing when something is done is something that we're really bad, like just being like, okay, it's done. Um, and I think that's like a challenge for every medium, like painting. I'm sure it's the same in prose of just like being like, it's finally finished. And because if you overwork something, it will become less human in a way.
I always struggle with that, and the best answer I can come up with is will anyone notice if I made this change? I don't know. It's hard. That's what I think about. Like,
Mhm.
if I made this change or took that word out or changed this line, is anyone going to notice? And if they don't, it's probably. When I would tell my students, I call it the "Are they going to add it back" test. Like, if you send this to someone, and if you send something to someone and they don't know that something was missing, are they going to add it back there? If they're not going to add it back, it's probably fine the way it is. That's at least a pro's perspective of that.
Mm. Yeah.
Uh,
Totally.
And for us, and it's like a lot of musicians get caught on like the first revision of a mix, then they'll get into like revision 7 or 8 of a mix, and they'll listen to the first one and be like, actually, that one's perfect. Like they just had
Right.
to like go through the process of trying it all to hear that the first one was the best.
Well, I have a quote here. I had Christian Lee Hudson on about a year ago, and he said exactly what you're talking about. He said, "My biggest hurdle as a writer is trying to hack my brain to become less critical." And I think
Mm,
that's what you're talking about is just getting the hell out of your way, out of your own way. That's the biggest problem is just got to get out of your way. And I had Matt Nathanson on and he called it the assassin. The assassin is that thing on his shoulder as he writes that's telling him, don't do that, don't do that. And he's like, I need to get rid of the assassin because it's so bad for me. I just got to get all that stuff out there, not worry in the initial pass whether it should be there.
well, I think it's partly, I feel like a lot of people that make stuff in any way are also, you know, not staunch critics, but have deep opinions about music or music or art or film or books. And so when they see themselves starting to do something that they would criticize for someone else, it's like that thing where you're like not letting yourself like you're kind of like being hard on everything. But yeah, the assassin's a great way to put it.
And I interviewed the writer Anthony Doerr a few years ago. He wrote a book called All the Light We Cannot See and won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. And I asked him about writer's block, and I'll never forget this. He said, I don't believe in writer's block. He called writer's block, he said, writer's block is a failure of courage. And I love that idea of just don't be afraid to write the bad stuff. Like everyone has something up there, and no one is so special that they can't write the bad stuff. But I love that he called it a failure of courage, that you just got to get that stuff out there. And when I was a professor, I would assign the essay by Anne Lamott, the novelist. The essay was called Shitty First Drafts. And I loved that idea of just the first draft of something really should be shitty. What's your take on that, Julian?
Uh, I mean, I think I've felt it. Like I just mentioned, I would call it writer's block, but I think we were just like we just had no idea what we wanted to make, and we were like also too burnt out to find the energy to make the bad stuff. Because ever since then, obviously we've grown up a little more. We haven't toured the last couple records as like crazy hard. Um, and yeah, I think back on that period, like, why did we, like, what happened there? You know, like we jump at the chance to sit down and write the bad stuff now.
So I, that's a great quote, by the way. I love that. Jump at the chance to write the bad stuff. But I think I love that idea. It's very liberating. Uh, it reminds me of the writer Joseph Conrad wrote there's a story about him writing. Um, he wrote Heart of Darkness and a bunch of other books. And he said there was a story about he wrote like a 15-page letter to his cousins complaining about writer's block, missing the irony of the fact that he just wrote a 15-page letter. I want to ask about working out because one of you said it. I think exercise. I find working out to be, for me, the best, not just for stress, but the best way to break through and to get ideas. So, how important is movement? Max, I'll start with you. How important is movement to your process?
Um, so I have two main things that I do. I swim and I grew up swimming, which is like deep quiet time. So that's like no music, no phone, like it's in the locker, a true hour of silence. And um swimming is a lot of counting, because I don't use a watch. It's just like everything is paced, like you're focused on a very simple goal. And the other thing I do is I play like pickup soccer, which again is like a no phone lost in like both things. I think swimming is a little more meditative, and I'll think about music and songs and like kind of swim to songs in my head, even songs that we're working on, but in less of like a creative way, more of just like a repetition way. And then with soccer, that's just like complete freedom of any thought, because you don't have any time to really consider anything except what you're doing. Um, but I think both things have become very important, especially after I turned 30 for some reason. I don't know why.
So are you getting, those are very different activities though. Swimming involves, I ran track in college, and that's very different because when you're running, you have to pay attention to your environment. But when you're swimming, our kids all did swimming. So I'm well aware of that whole, 5 a.m. practices and all that kind of
Oh yeah,
stuff.
I did it until I was 18. Yeah, I did that whole
Yeah.
thing.
But I never swam. My wife did. But I remember a son saying, like, you're just staring at this obviously, staring at the bottom of the pool. Um, but I feel like that's a much more monotonous activity than soccer, where you really have to, you're looking at what's going on around you. So I guess, are you getting song ideas while you're swimming? Have you ever gotten ideas during that repetitive motion?
More so like arrangement, like puzzle stuff, less like I think my brain is like generally music first maybe to a fault. So like, when when I'm swimming, I like kind of like think about if get to work a little earlier, a midday swim, I'll kind of like think about like a bass line or something and then like come back and try it. Um, but part of like and I hated swimming growing up. Like when I had to do the 5 a.m. I like the monotony of it was like my least favorite thing. Honestly, like again, when I turned 30, so if your kids relate to that, like hate it now. Like I'm so grateful for it now that I'm older, of having the monotony, honestly. Even though like when I was younger, I thought it was like so antisocial or something.
Julian, how about you? The role of movement to your process, is it important?
It is. I'm really just a jogger and a long walker. Um, I feel like the way that it's most important to my process, or like our process, is um well, I need to listen to enough music that I forget the idea that we're currently working on. I guess what I'm saying is like it's more of an escape to allow me to like give myself back some perspective. Um so yeah, I do listen to music just to like sort of like scrub the idea from my head and try to listen to a catchy song so like I can get someone else's song stuck in my head. And then I'll throw on like a podcast to just completely, if I want to like completely try not to think about music. And then I can get back. Maybe Max is still working on, fiddling with whatever. And then sometimes I can have like a new perspective to bring to the table.
Related to that, Max, I'll ask you this, and I always quote, my favorite quote is Agatha Christie, the writer, said the best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes. And related to that is the idea of that we get our best ideas. That's why we get our best ideas in the shower, when our brains are engaged in activities that require no conscious thought. So I've heard things like doing the dishes, mowing the lawn, folding laundry, vacuuming. When you're doing something that requires no conscious thought, that's when the unconscious bubbles up. So that's related to swimming because there's the monotony. But have you ever had that happen when have you ever had those eureka moments happen when you're doing something that requires no thought whatsoever?
I had this kind of terrible, but kind of like truly monotonous. Well, not, I was driving like a clothing delivery van for this clothing company that I will not name. It's basically driving like
Hand delivery.
yeah, we call it, Ziad did the same job, and Malcolm. We were the pants delivery boys. Um we would just like drive sometimes all the way out to Indiana, but just like around the suburbs, throughout just all over the Chicagoland area. Um and the vans were so shitty that they didn't really even have working radios, which was amazing because I could um basically either just like listen to like whatever like rough Whitney demo we had off my phone, but more often than not sit in silence while driving I'm not really a road rage type dude. Otherwise, this probably wouldn't have worked out. But it was it was like, I mean, there was definitely a few lyrics on the first record that popped in, and just like, oh my god, we have to try that, and would like type it into my notes or whatever. Um, so yeah, that pants delivery was my eureka moment, or one of
Well,
them.
David Byrne. That's what David Byrne said. A car is a great place to write lyrics. It frees your brain up. Max, how about you?
Honestly, it's hard to play. No, I think that like I really the way that I kind of like enjoy the puzzle of music making is very just like if an idea that I like going back to the first question, if an idea that like is kind of a stinker at the beginning, or like if it's the most simple two chords, if I'm like, oh, I can't think of it, or I want to work today, I'm just gonna put two chords on a loop and see how I can like make this unique. Um and so it's a lot of just like kind of sitting in front of something and trying to like figure out the puzzle. And sometimes when like while swimming or something, I'll like figure out a piece of that puzzle and then come try it and refine it. But rarely is the random thoughtless eureka moment is I wish.
A lot of times, though, I feel like it'll happen. And I feel like I've seen it happen with him if we're like on the phone with our manager or something, or just really anyone, like a bandmate, if we have something to discuss and the call is going a little long. I think it happens to both of us where it's like, oh shit, like it'll like whatever blockade you needed to break through like happens when you're in the middle of like literally talking to someone. And I've seen Max just be like, all right, bye, and like and get up and like go to the studio to try it out. You know?
Max, it reminds me, this is probably before COVID, I interviewed Liz Fair and she told me that she swims and she gets so many ideas when she's swimming. So I have heard that.
And I also run, but my running practice is like a little psychopath. It's like I listen to the same song over and over again. And that's usually my pace. So like if I usually have songs that are like certain paces, and so I don't have to like pay attention to my phone or something. I'll just have the song on repeat and know that if I run to the rhythm of it, then I'm making the pace that I want. But it'll go be months that I'll have the same song, and whenever I run, it's just that's the song, and it could be about
Just
45
BPM.
It could be like a 45-minute to an hour long run 3 times a week, and it's the same song. Don't completely mindless to the music, just like over and over again.
That's amazing. I could never, ever do that. That's so impressive that you can have the same song over and over. Um, all right, let's end with this then. Other types of art as influences. I do find that songwriters are voracious readers for the most part. Julian, we'll start with you. How much do you get to read, and does that ever influence your writing?
It doesn't influence it enough, I will say.
Hmm.
I feel like I'm like a serial, like I'll read the first 40 pages of a book and then I'll just find myself slowing down and be like, man, I don't know. It's just like I need a book to like really grab me and hold on to me. Um, in order to like really let it in. Um, but when that happens, it usually does end up being a book that like, either affects the record that we're writing or whatever. I feel like the last one that I read that really did that to me was this book called Molly by Blake Butler, I think was his name, or is his name. And it's just like a really tragic and insane autobiographical story about, or book about like this period of his life involving his wife. And there was just so much, just really, really intense. And I think it allowed us to like dive in a little bit, um, less cautiously into like talking about, you know, death and, all the pain involved in our last record, really.
How do you pick what book to choose? Are you a genre person, an author person, and how do you know what's next?
I'll usually talk to people about it or like listen to, uh, various podcasts that will either be interviewing or like recommending. And, all I need is like a brief description of what the book's about, to know that I'll be into it though, usually.
All right, Max, how about you?
Um, this year has been a little. This is like the nerdy, or it's like a very dorky thing to me. But we toured a lot this summer, and my girlfriend and I did like a 2-person book club to try to like read, and we tried to keep up with each other and stuff. So we read some good books this year. Say Nothing was one of my favorites. It's about the Belfast, and we read Martyr, which is about like kind of like Iranian from the Midwest dealing with his roots. Perfect Victims was one of my favorite. That was a member of the band Ziad gave it to me. It's about the genocide in Palestine. And then it's from a younger author who writes very creatively. And right now our book for fall, since it was kind of sleepy, neither of us have read Anna Karenina. So we're reading Anna Karenina, which is actually pretty fun. It's like old smut, it's like ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous book.
And that's it for the latest episode of Songwriters on Process. You can find all of the old episodes on all major streaming platforms and probably some minor ones as well. You can also find them on the Songwriters on Process website. I started the site back in 2011, so that means there are hundreds upon hundreds of interviews with some of the world's best songwriters. So take a deep dive into some of those episodes. They are all great. Of course, I'm biased. Also, shameless plug, my book, Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, that is me, is out now on Hachette Books and in all major bookstores. Mark is a good friend of mine. He is the guitarist in the metal band Lamb of God. And so we collaborated on his memoir. I'm biased, but that's a damn good book. Again, it is called Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir. And lastly, if you want to get in touch, go to the Songwriters on Process website. You can fill out a handy contact form, and it'll get to me that way. You can also email me at ben@songwritersonprocess.com. I'm all ears. Send me your comments, your suggestions, your complaints, people you want me to interview. I get great suggestions all the time. I can't respond to all of the emails because I get a lot of them, but I do read all of them. And let me know your thoughts. If you have ideas for people you want me to interview, there's your chance. And with that, I am out. See you next time.